There are multiple applications for video games. One of them, of course, is entertainment. That's probably the most recognized one, where people go to play games the same way that you go to play a game of poker or chess. There's an inherent appeal and fascination with electronic games. They tend to be very powerful and engaging. It's important to note, though, that video games have many educational applications. And this has been true right from the very beginning. There's a whole genre of games that have to do with exercise and personal health. They're called serious games. And the serious games are a whole arena that have to do with educational and personal enrichment experiences related to these to interactive gaming. Both gambling and interactive games have a reward system, which I will cover in my presentation, that has to do with being challenging, not relinquishing enough control, but providing the promise that you're going to win. And this uncertainty about whether you're going to prevail in a gaming situation or lose, if there are enough rewards that are given, then that encourages people to remain glued to the experience. Well, I think a good point of departure is to talk about the game of Pong, which Nolan Bushnell and this very tiny company back in 1972 created with an engineer, which later became Atari. All Pong was a couple of paddles and on either side of the screen, and you could either play with someone else or you could play against the machine, and you're just knocking a white blip across the screen. And what was happening there was the game was talking to the player. The player would be using the paddle to hit the ball back, and the paddle on the other side, run by the machine, was trying to defeat the player by hitting the ball and getting increasingly more difficult as the player gains skills. And so there was this quality in Pong of some sort of intelligence that was arrayed against, that was on the other side of the screen, playing against the player, and countering his or her moves. And this was very different than the media that had existed before: radio, television, the telephone. Well, telephone actually is quite interactive, but I should say radio and movies and television up to that point was a one-way street. You just basically passively listened to an experience that was presented to you. And in the video game now, the gaming, the programming, the algorithms that drove those paddles and that ball across the screen were in relationship to the game player. And so as we move from Pong, the games became much more sophisticated. Pong, from becoming an arcade, became a home console that you could play on a video screen. Later, Atari realized that they could take arcade games like Pac-Man and Battlezone and a variety of other Donkey Kong and the really popular arcade games and put them into a console. So now that you could load the video games into a console and play them back on your screen, you could get a wide variety of video game experiences. That was the Atari 2400. When that was released, that became a big game changer and opened up the market for early video games. And they began spreading across the planet. As video games moved into consoles, the console-based video games to this day remain a big part of the industry, but it was a major innovation moving into the 1980s and 90s. And then the advent of the PC, personal computer, in the 1980s, early 1990s, you think of those early computers and we're using them for spreadsheets, right? Word processing in spreadsheets and simple, publishing simple documents, printing them out and all that sort of thing. They weren't very powerful compared to PCs today. But there were a couple of game developers in their early 20s, John Carmack and John Romero. And these guys were just brilliant. It was id Software. They came out with Castle Wolfenstein. That just swept the internet like a storm. And then Romero and Carmack did the next step. They took that game and they created, took the model for it and created a game called Doom. Doom was then a version of Doom was able to connect on a network with other game players. And the other innovation that they made was that Romero and Carmack decided, well, why can't we let our game players make their own versions of the game? And so they released what's called middleware for free, so that people playing their games could actually make their own versions of the game. And that sort of violated what every game company at that time was thinking was even conceivable. This idea of commonly used, releasing software tools to build your own. It's called middleware that you can build, and also programming that actually lets you build versions of the game is a concept that was very powerful and moved things forward very quickly for the game industry. So right about that period of time, this would have been in the 1990s, there was this networking computer experience, the idea that you could bring in multiple people into a game environment. All of those started to come about in the late 1990s, and the multi-user gaming concept really took off. And by the year 2004, World of Warcraft was released, which was, it's called a role-playing game, an RPG. The basic concept is the RPG is the hero's journey. You go in as a character at the bottom of the skill level, and then as you play the game, you begin to level up as you accrue victories and get involved with various activities within the game. The game will reward you with increased powers and abilities. And it turns out as you're playing the game, it's essential that you become aligned with a group or a guild where you now can get together, gather together, and go out on joint quests and to defeat adversaries or complete quests within the game. And these became, because it was now a social environment, versus a single player game, if you're just one person against the game, these social environments became very compelling, and there was a lot of peer pressure to participate in these guilds on these quests. The multi-user situation, as we're taking a look at more advanced systems, as we're looking at virtual reality, this idea of a network shared working environment within a three-dimensional space is still very current and very important moving forward. The other part to this, and it gets back to what we first looked at in the Game of Pong, which is the game itself as being a form of artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence in the more advanced levels now can read my gestures. I have an Oculus Quest headset, which I don't have a cord connecting me to anything. I can set it so that it just adjust to my hand gestures. So now if I want to move a screen, I just move the screen down with my finger. If I want to select something, I click my fingers. And so it's understanding gestures, voice commands, and understand spatially where I am. Of course, all of that information is being transmitted across the internet, right? So that form of artificial intelligence is also providing just tons of data to, in this case, Facebook, who owns the Oculus Quest, provides tons of data for them for marketing purposes and for figuring out whether you're responding positively or to something, or if you're choosing something over something else in terms of gameplay or how long you're on. There's a ton of data that's being acquired while we're in relationship with this artificial intelligence. So as we move from the simple Pong game to where we are now, we're at a very different level. And the artificial intelligence will only become more and more sophisticated. This idea that it potentially could read like pupil size, galvanic skin, the amount of sweat that's being released, potentially whether you're pulled back and fearful, or whether you're interested in looking forward, and your eye width, and all of those what are called biometric kinds of information can be extracted and can be transmitted for highly sophisticated forms of AI on the other end to sort it out and to create overall patterns and trends. So you can look at these as an innovation, this kind of machine learning and the idea that data can be interpreted in very sophisticated ways. That's a huge innovation. But we need to be looking closely at that in terms of how much of that information we want to be released and used, and whether how much we want to engage with the technology. Those are questions everyone's going to need to be making. In terms of those are some of the major innovations that I can think of right now that have taken place. I should mention, I'll be getting into the virtual reality environment during the workshop, but it's worth mentioning here as a major innovation. And you can see that it's connected to gaming. But I was talking with one of the, he's a developer, an artist who works at Valve Software in Bellevue, Washington. They're one of the leading video game and VR development companies. They create both software and hardware. And his description of virtual reality is that it's not film and it's not video games, it's something else. It's something in between those two. And just a brief overview description of virtual reality is that it involves a headset, and it involves controllers, and stereo audio. So the headset basically gives you two simultaneously views of the gaming experience, which is stereoscopy, right? You have two views that creates true 3 dimensions. Virtual reality feels like you're really present. And actually there's a term presence, which is the idea when you're in a room and you're looking around like you normally do in your normal life, you feel like you're really there, right? The virtual reality experience, the visual displays create a sense that you are within an environment, that you're fully present there. It's hard to explain until you use it, and then once you put the headset on and have had an experience with virtual reality, you realize, oh my gosh. What's happening with virtual reality then is that rather than having, in a few years, rather than having a big headset on your head, that the display devices will probably take the form of something like a pair of glasses. That will be a next phase, or potentially they've had success with contact lenses as well. And so as the processing power gets smaller and smaller, more lightweight, less expensive, the ability to incorporate these VR experiences within a small device or even invisibly through earbuds, having stereophonic audio. The idea is that these immersive experiences will become lighter weight, will become pretty much invisible and ubiquitous. People will be wearing them just like they wear clothes. There are forms of virtual reality where you are immersed, you're within a complete world of experience. It's like you're transported to a different location. That's called immersive VR. And then there's what's called augmented virtual reality, which is this idea that I can overlay, I can be walking down this, I could be walking in a, say one of those large stores, like Lowe's or Office Depot. And as I'm walking through the store, I can see annotations show up on my lenses of my glasses or my contact lenses that let me know how expensive it is, where things are located within the store. Or if I'm a car engineer working on, say, an airplane engine, I can see data being sent back to me of how fuel is moving through the engine, and it shows me what different parts are doing and what their condition are. And that information is annotated or overlaid on the real world. There's a wide variety of different kinds of interactive experiences that are out there, and a familiarity with some of the main definitions and concepts associated with that interactive media, just so that there's a vocabulary and understanding of what we mean when we say interactive entertainment or interactive media. So that's the first theme. Second theme is that we are on a co-evolutionary pathway with this technology, that this is more than just entertainment and gaming, and we associate with games for pleasure. How much do we want this technology to be impinging and interleaved with our lives? And is this a positive development, or is this something that we need to have concerns about? And this business of privacy, how much privacy are we willing to relinquish using these devices? This idea of isolation, if we're using these devices, how does that affect our social lives and our ability to get along with people in the real world? So there's a promise and peril aspect to this that I want people to be thinking about. And so that's the third theme.